Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome to Beyond the Score. Today we're going to talk about the WMLS 3, the Woodcock-Munoz Language Survey. Today's presentation is basically going to provide you with an overview of what the WMLS 3 is and how you might be able to integrate it into your practice. So excited to be here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend about an hour with me going over the WMLS 3. So my name is Tammy Stevens. I am the Senior Clinical Assessment Consultant for Riverside. I am an educational diagnostician, also one of the authors of the Core Selective Evaluation Process, the CSEP model, which is a PSW model that is very comprehensive and pulls in, really focuses a lot on the multiple sources of data as well as the norm reference testing. I'm also the creator of this Beyond the Score webinar series. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. There is a handout that I've attached of the PowerPoint slides that's on the control panel. So be sure to download those and save those if you want to keep those before we exit out of the program. Post any questions that might come up during the presentation in the chat or question box on the control panel, and I'll try to get to those at the end. Remember to sign up for future Beyond the Score webinar offerings. We do have a few more left for this spring, so check those out on csep.online. Full listing can be found there. And then you will receive a certificate of participation. This will be emailed out tomorrow around this time. You should receive an email from GoToWebinar with a link for you to download and save your certificate. If you have any issues with that, you can always reach out to me directly and we can get one sent to you. We do have a CSEP Beyond the Score Facebook page, so if you're not a member, we'd love for you to join. There's about almost, there's 2,400 people on there now. We have a newsletter that you can sign up for, it's free, and then this is the website for CSEP where you can find that full listing of the Beyond the Score webinars in addition to some additional resources. So today what we're going to do is talk about the WMLS, the Woodcock-Munoz Language Survey. And really what I'm going to do is highlight the features of the battery of tests, as well as talk about the versatility of the battery. I really want to look at the many different ways that you can integrate the WMLS into your practice, but two specific areas that I know are hot topics in today's environment are dyslexia evaluations and dysgraphia evaluations. So we'll talk a bit about how you might be able to, you might think about integrating some of the tests from the WMLS into those assessments. There's also an add-on program that's available that links assessment results to interventions, also to curriculum recommendations, and also leveled books. So again, based on the performance of the student on the assessment itself, there are recommendations for different books that might be appropriate at different levels, etc. This is a great, I've been thinking about, like, with the increased focus on the impact and need statements. I've also been thinking about how, these types of programs that will allow you to, individualize those interventions based on the student's performance might be a great way to kind of make the process a little more efficient for you as an evaluator. So something to kind of think about. I think about that in relation to the WMLS intervention system, but I also think about it in terms of the WJs and the ECAD's WIP system, which is a list of interventions as well. There's also a remote testing option that we've made available since COVID hit. So I just want to kind of reiterate and show you that that is still available currently. Thank goodness we don't have to really worry about that. But if something were to happen in the future, I just wanted you to know that the resources are available for you. Then we'll wrap everything up, and I'll see if we have any questions at the end. So as I'm kind of going through the beginning slides about the WMLS, I'd love for you to put in the chat or the question box. Just let me know if you're a user of the Woodcock Munoz, or if you've used the previous version before. Just like to get an idea. This particular assessment or battery of tests was actually used more so in the gen ed realm of education. Our schools here in Texas actually used it mainly to establish language proficiency of this each of the students. So historically, it's not been used for special education evaluations or evaluations for dyslexia, dysgraphia, et cetera. So it's kind of new to a lot of us in the special ed world, but you're going to find that it is very, very similar to the WJ products. So I'm trying to get this control panel out of my way here. All right, so let's take a look at the Woodcock Munoz language survey. So it's really a broad sampling of academic language proficiency in the areas listed here. So it does assess listening, speaking, reading, and writing. It is appropriate for, or has the norms for ages 3 years through 22 and it is available in English and in Spanish. So when you're assessing a child, maybe who's bilingual, English and Spanish, you can make a direct comparison to, look when we're looking at their performance in each of the languages. So as we go through, look at the components, there are 2 forms of test books in English. There's a Form A and a Form B, and there's 1 form of Spanish. There's also test record. We'll talk a little bit about the comprehensiveness of the test record. It does have a lot of there's areas where you can fill in qualitative information about the student's language history. There's also a response booklet, audio recording. The audio recording is housed online, and the scoring for the WMLS is through the Riverside Score platform. So if you purchase the WMLS 3, it'll be added to your online scoring platform along with your Batteria and your WJ. There is a comprehensive manual that comes along with the kit as well, and there are some online training videos available as well. And then I mentioned that add-on, it's an additional cost for you to access the online parent-teacher intervention system, but we'll talk a little bit about that and what that looks like at the end of the presentation. So it does include 8 tests. Again, 2 forms in English and 1 form in Spanish. It can be used with the WJ4 and or the Batteria 4 when you're completing comprehensive evaluations. Provides that online scoring and reporting, and again, it has improved cluster composition to better measure listening, speaking, reading, and writing domains. Now, one of the ways that it can be used with either the WJ or achievement or the Batteria achievement is you could use it when looking at assessing oral language skills, oral expression and listening comp. There are 2 tests in each of those areas that can be utilized. Right now, I know a lot of us are using the oral language battery, which is just as good. But I do want you to know that you could pair up your Batteria or your WJ achievements with the WMLS as well. So what's new about it? Well, it did retain 5 tests that were on the previous version of the WMLS, and that's the WMLS-R. It kept the analogies test, the picture vocabulary, letter word identification, passage comprehension, and dictation. It did eliminate 2 of the tests from the WMLS-R, and those are understanding directions and story recall. And for those of you who are familiar with the WJs, you know these were moved to different batteries in the WJ family in the batteria. And then the WMLS-3 includes 3 new tests. There's an oral comprehension test, there's an oral language expression, and then there's a written language expression. So I'm going to show you what some of those look like when we go through, as we go through the presentation. So when we're looking at the organization, we have, again, your English version, your 8 tests listed here, your Spanish version with the 8 tests listed here. You notice that only one of the tests have audio recording, and that's the oral comprehension. So again, that's going to be housed up under the online scoring platform under resources. And then you do need the student response booklet for those two writing tests. So a cool thing about the structure of the WMLS is that it provides 2 tests for each language domain. One test is for basic or foundational skills in that area, and then the other test is more at looking at application or functional skills. So again, those areas that are assessed using the WMLS-3 are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So you'll notice there's nothing in here for math. It's just the listening, speaking, reading, writing. Just like with the WJ and the batteria, we do have the selective testing table that will help you select your targeted testing based on the referral question. So you can use those, again, both in English and in Spanish. And then when I mentioned that we do have tests that within the WMLS 3 that assesses basic skills. So those odd numbered tests are the tests that assess basic skills. So test 1 is assessing the basic skills associated with listening, and this one is analogies. Speaking, the basic skill is picture vocabulary, and then reading would be the letter word identification, and then writing is dictation. And as you would imagine, all of your even numbered tests are those that test or assess those applied skills. So test 2 is oral comprehension. That's testing that applied skill of listening. Test 4 is oral language expression, which is looking at applied skills of speaking, and then passage comprehension for reading, and then written language expression is for writing. So let's take a look at the tests that are made up of this particular battery. So again, 2 tests in listening. The first one is analogies that assesses those basic skills for listening. You can notice here that we start out with number 18. On is to start, as off is to, and the student has to complete that analogy. Notice as well, the look and feels very similar to the WJ and the batteria. You do have your correct responses on your side of the easel, as well as those responses deemed incorrect. And there are some items that if the student says something specific like shut down, we can query them and ask them to tell me another answer. So make sure, again, when you're administering these tests that you are following the standardized procedures. And if the student were to say shut down here, you should query them to give them the opportunity to give you the correct answer. You can only query one time. And then food is to hunger as water is to, and the correct answer is thirst. So those are the types of skills that are assessed when we're looking at the basic skills for listening. Then the applied skills, this is one of the new tests, and this is the one that requires the audio recording. This is oral comprehension. For item number 2, my mommy reads me a, and they have to fill in the blank with the appropriate word. So they'll listen to the statement being read to them, and then they have to comprehend it, and then give that answer that makes the most sense in that particular sentence. Games are to play, books are to read or look at would be a correct answer. For the speaking tests, again, for basic skills, this picture vocabulary looks very similar to the other measures that I mentioned before. So your job is to point to a picture on the examinee's page and say, what is this? You know, an apple, what is the, point to the picture and say, what is this? So very simple, very similar to picture vocabulary that you'd find in the WJ. And then the new measure that looks at the applied skills for speaking is oral language expression. And with this one, this is number 18, point to the picture and say, use the word gliding in a complete sentence that tells about the picture. Do not change the word in any way. So they have to orally give you a sentence using the word gliding without changing it. So we have what is deemed as correct. They have to use the stimulus word without changing its form in a complete coherent sentence and mention something about the picture. And they give you an example. We saw the eagle gliding overhead would be an appropriate response. This particular test, something to kind of point out to you, and you'll see this when we get to the writing items, but it's the same for this. They give you on your easel what is considered a correct response. There's no separate appendix that you would go to in the manual to help with the scoring. And that's the same way with the writing. Everything's going to be on the easel for you that you need to score it. And then the reading tests, the basic skills are letter word identification, and they start out with pointing to letters, saying letters, pointing to words, saying words, and then it ends up with a list of words they have to read. You can see this is the upper end of the items. And then passage comprehension is the applied skills test for reading. And again, they have to be able to read the statement and then provide a word that goes into the blank. So these are very, very similar to the WJs. And then finally, the writing test for the basic skills is dictation. This one I like because it does give you spelling words as well as punctuation. So you're able to keep track and do an error analysis to see where if the student's having more issues with spelling or punctuation or both. So some of the items are just like a dictated spelling test. Other items like 26 make an exclamation point. So they have to know what different punctuation marks are to get it correct. And so that's assessing the basic skills. And then the new written language expression is the measure for applied skills. This one, they're provided with a picture with 3 words. They're told to look at the picture and the words walked up stairs. Use these words and any others you need to make a good sentence about the picture. You can use the words in any order, but do not change the words in any way. So as I mentioned before, the examples are provided here, which would, you know, what would be deemed as a 0, and then what would be deemed as a score of 1. So all of your scoring is going to be on the easel, not in the examiner's manual. And then with the test record or the protocol, You have the identifying information, which is what we see on all of the test records or protocols. But they wanted to make sure they added some space here for you to be able to document students' language background information. Um, so here's a section that's optional, provides you with more of that qualitative information that can help you as you're interpreting and writing up your reports. So they're asking things like information about the examinee collected from who, was it the home language survey, parent, teacher, school records, etc. Examinee is classified as select one, native English speaker or a second language learner of English, or are they native English speaker learning another language as a foreign or heritage language, or they're a simultaneous bilingual individual speaking multiple languages from a young age. Then they're asking examinees first or native language, so you can pick from the list here, or if it's not listed, you can write in other. And then there's a series of questions around what the examinee speaks at home, what others in the home speak. With peers, examinee speaks what language or languages, and then at school, examinee speaks what language or languages. So you can document all of this on the test record or protocol. And then there's also a section where you can keep track of academic language exposure. So again, all of this can be integrated into your interpretation and into your report. So the examinee is currently attending a or an English only program for how many years and months, or are they in a bilingual program in English and another language for how many years and months, dual language, sheltered English, etc. Outside of the US, the examinee received prior academic language instruction in what other country, what was the language of academic instruction, and how many years. And then did they previously attend any other of these programs? And then if applicable, the examinee will be attending one of these programs. So again, just trying to get a good, solid understanding of the student's academic language exposure as well. So with the WMLS, there are various levels of information. I think a lot of times we focus only on like standard scores and percentile ranks, but just keep in mind, just like with the other batteries, there's a lot more information that you can obtain when using these tests. One of them is the age and grade-based norms, which you can run the results both either through age or grade-based norms to look at those standard scores and those percentile ranks. But this is the hierarchy of test information. So we do have level one, which is the qualitative. So that kind of encompasses what I just showed you about the information that can be collected about students' language use, their academic history. It also includes taking good notes around behaviors that were observed during the testing, keeping track of various types of errors that are made so that you can go back and conduct an error analysis later to get a better understanding of the learner or where that struggle is. So there's a lot of, of opportunity to pull in qualitative information. The other place I think about it too is like when they're completing these writing samples, you're able to get observe and obtain some good qualitative information around pencil grip, posture, things like that when you're looking at dysgraphia as well. And then you can also go back and again look at the formation of letters, look at how they write the letters while observing them. Different types of qualitative information can be pulled in. Then you have level two, which is level of development. This one I really try to stay away from, the age and grade equivalents. They're oftentimes misinterpreted, and I really don't recommend reporting those out. But you also have the W score that's unique to the WJ products that allows you to uh, look at over time. You can look at that W score, which is that foundational metric that's used for the WJ products. You can use that to look at growth over time if you're comparing students' performance, like every 3 years. If you're assessing them, you can look at that W score. And that W score is also used to help create the relative proficiency index, the RPI. There's a language proficiency index, so we can look at, you know, those not CAL scores per se, but there's really descriptors of language proficiency that's included on the WMLS, which we know it's important that we look at language for all kiddos. So looking at and seeing how language might be affecting the student's performance is really important. And then there's also instructional or developmental zones that you can look at. I highly, highly recommend, if you've been on other webinars that I've provided, um, if you're a WJ user, you really need to look at the relative proficiency index. The relative proficiency index is a criterion referenced measure, and it allows you to look at and understand functioning of the student's performance. It looks at levels of proficiency. Whereas when we go to level 4 in our hierarchy of test information, we're talking about standard scores, percentile ranks, which basically tells us that student's relative standing in a group. So it tells us where that student scored in relation to that normal curve, and also in relation to the normative sample that you're comparing them to. So that standard score, that percentile rank, tells you nothing about students' functioning, which is why oftentimes it's not necessarily always aligned with what the teacher reports seen in the classroom. If you want to look at what, try to figure out what the teacher's seeing, you're better off to look at the RPI, because it is a criterion reference measure that does measure functioning or proficiency. And it is oftentimes better aligned with what's happening in the classroom. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. And then I've already kind of went through these, but the next few slides take each of those levels and give you some additional information. With the level 1, with the qualitative information, for those of you who are familiar with CSEP, we are really advocating that we use multiple sources of data, that our tests, our test scores, are only one piece of the data, right? And that when we are using these tests, we need to keep good records or make good comments and notes of behaviors that you observe during the testing session, because that's a lot of rich information that you're able to pull back in to the assessment process, and combine it with the other data that's been collected, as is the error analysis across different tests too. So take really good notes during that testing session so that you are able to integrate a lot of that into the interpretation piece as well. And I've talked about level 2, which I'm not a fan of. I'm going to go right past that one. And then level 3 is going to be your criterion referenced information, and it indicates the quality of performance or level of proficiency. And it also indicates the range of development or instruction. So it tells you, it gives you an understanding of whether that student is performing at the independent level of instruction or the frustration level of instruction, etc. And then, as I mentioned, that RPI falls within this particular area. This is the RPI. RPIs range from 0 over 90 to 100 over 90. They're expressed as a fraction with a denominator fixed at 90. And then the numerator is going to indicate the examinee's proficiency on that task and predict that student's level of success on similar tasks. So if we have a 90, if an examinee scores a 90 over 90, that indicates that that student has average proficiency on that task. If they score a 96 over 90, what that means is that when let's say we run age-based norms, when same age peers score at 90% proficiency, this particular student scores at 96% proficiency, above where same age peers are scoring and performing. So that's telling us that on those types of tasks, that student is actually working on an independent level, and that they would find those similar tasks very easy in the classroom. However, if they scored a 75 over 90, let's say in a basic reading, letter word identification, so that would mean that when same age peers score at 90% proficiency on those basic reading skills, this particular student scored at 75% proficiency, which falls within the frustration level and indicates that the student that we're testing or assessing is going to find those types of tasks very difficult in the classroom. Again, a lot of times if you don't look beyond or interpret beyond the standard score, you're going to miss the boat, because sometimes the standard score, because it's an ordinal scale, and again, it's going to show you where that student's performance was in relation to the normative sample on that normal curve. Sometimes they may fall out at 90, 91, and we're trained that, oh, well, if it's a 90, you know, it's pretty good. It's a low average. But if you go look at the RPI, oftentimes that RPI says something, it tells a very different story. So incorporate that RPI into your assessment if you're not already doing that. And then these are the language proficiency levels. Again, they used to use CALP, but for the WMLS 3, they use proficiency levels. So whether the student's at initial development, early development, continuing development, all the way up to advanced proficiency. So, and these should not be crossed out. These are just kind of, these lines for whatever reason are out of place. So those are the 6 areas or 6 levels of language proficiency. And again, they are based off of the RPI score and the W score, which is again unique to the WJ. There's also what's called a comparative language index score, a CLI, that compares Spanish and English proficiency on selected clusters. And it's helpful when you're trying to determine language dominance. Again, it uses the numerator from the obtained RPIs to create the CLI. So the Spanish numerator is used as the numerator on the CLI, and then the English numerator is used as the denominator on the CLI, and I'll show you what that looks like. So for the comparative language index score, again, just another lens of looking at students' performance. This particular student scored an RPI of 66 over 90 on the Spanish oral language proficiency area. So where same age peers were performing at 90% proficiency, this student scored at 66% language proficiency in the area of Spanish oral language. So they took the 66, put that as the numerator, and then English oral language proficiency, this same student scored an RPI of 15 over 90, which again, same age peers are scoring at 90% proficiency. He only scored at 15% proficiency on English oral language. So they took the 15 and put it as the denominator. So the CLI, the Spanish English CLI, is a 66 over 15. That gives us that comparative language index. We can see here that even though they're not the strongest in Spanish, right? I mean, 66 is over 90 is still low, but it's much better than the 15 over 90 that they scored in the English. So they are performing higher in Spanish than they are in English. So that's available on the WMLS. That's also available on the oral language battery. And then again, our level 4 is that the peer comparisons, and that's looking at the norm referenced information. It reflects that relative standing within a peer group. And then it's we typically use our standard scores percentile ranks when looking at those. There are digital test records available, just so you know. I know a lot of publishing companies are moving away from the paper pencil to more of a digital process. And you can use and purchase the digital test records. You will still need to use the paper workbooks for the writing, but all of your scoring can be done directly online through the Riverside Score platform. So it allows you to input item level data during administration with automatic score generation. It has guided administration with basal ceiling rules, which increases fidelity in the assessments and ensures accurate administration across all examiners. I know a lot of examiners struggle with that basal ceiling, or sometimes they forget about that complete page rule that's associated with the WJ products. This will help increase fidelity when administering those tests because it tells us when basal's been reached, when ceiling's been reached. Real time in the moment scores, and the examinee data records capture item level response notes. So there's a place for you to add notes. So here's a snapshot of what it looks like when you log in and you utilize the digital test record. You can choose the examinee's estimated ability level. It gives you the suggested starting point. It'll move you down to wherever the start point is. Basal ceiling rules are indicated within the program, and it also reminds you how to score. And then you can just score. Let's say you start with item 1 for whatever reason. A 1 or a 0, did they get it correct or incorrect? If you want to make any comments, you can make comments here. For items that have more than one response as correct, you can see here there's a drop down, so you can click on that and choose whatever the student said. So you're getting scoring it as you kind of go along. So this is an example where it takes you to that suggested starting point based on the student's estimated grade level. And it keeps track of the raw scores. And again, it's going to indicate to you when basal's been established or when ceiling's been established. And if basal's not established and you have to drop back, it's going to give you guidance for that as well. So just know these are available. We don't have a whole lot of people using these, and you can log in on an iPad, on a computer. It's just, again, another option for you to, if you want to go digital. You'll still need your easels. You'll still need your student workbook. It's not like Q Interactive where stuff's done all on an iPad or whatever, but it is a way for you to go more digital. So again, online scoring and reporting, it's included with a purchase of the test record. So when you purchase the battery, you get 25 test records, 25 score reports, and 25 workbooks per packet. And then again, your resource tab is going to provide you with the audio recording. There's different types of reports that's available. There's an examinee data record, there's a roster report, progress monitoring, teacher, parent reports. This is an example of the teacher report. This is actually an example of that add-on comprehensive report. So it's got more verbiage in it than what the basic report gives you. That basic report's just going to give you basically the score report, just like with the WJ. But if you want a more comprehensive report, you can get that add-on intervention system. And then there's a parent report as well. And then the parent report is also available in Spanish. So know that that's available. Love this. This is the plot of scores that shows if students been given both English and Spanish tests. We can look at how they performed in English versus Spanish, and you get a quick snapshot of, you know, um, where that student performed, and you can really look at this particular student, and you can really see that students performing much better in Spanish than they are in English in most areas. Okay, and then this is just that sample table scores. And again, you can customize this to include your standard score. You see the RPIs are here listed. Um, and they had grade equivalents on here. Um, language proficiency levels can be listed, so you can customize your report. So user qualification levels, administration and scoring requirements require proper training in the administration scoring of the WMLS 3. Again, if you're a user of the WJ Batteria products, this is really gonna be easy for you to give with the look and feel so similar, same rules, etc. Trained teachers can give this, educational diagnosticians, speech language pathologists, and school psychologists. And then your interpretation requirements do require that you have graduate level training in assessment. So these are some of the primary uses of the battery. Determine language proficiency or oral language dominance when we're looking at English, Spanish. You can monitor growth or change in language ability. Determine eligibility for bilingual or ESL services. Assess readiness for English only instruction. Or you could pull in some of these tests if you're conducting an SLD assessment in reading, writing, listening, or speaking. So other ways it can be used, and we're going to really probably skip forward here a bit because I really want to show you how to look at it as in terms of using it in for assessment of dyslexia and dysgraphia. But you can also use it to help determine eligibility for language impairment. I have some speech language pathologists that are using it as part of their assessments, assist in educational planning and program evaluations, etc. So I'm going to go through these because this is pretty self-explanatory, especially the way that it's the test is laid out, where you do have your English and Spanish, and that you can look at language proficiency in these different areas. Just point out, it's so important to understand BICS and CALP, the differences between BICS and CALP, and how we are able to obtain language proficiency descriptors using the WMLS. The other thing I like to point out, and this really doesn't really go here, I should move it to the dyslexia part, but understanding the importance of language and reading. And there's a lot of theories out there about reading, and one of the theories I really like is the simple view of reading. And the authors point out that not only do we know word recognition is important to be a good reader, language comprehension is also important. And we know students have to have these two skills intact in order for them to have good reading comprehension skills. So those together create good reading comprehension. I really love this one, and I'm putting together some trainings around reading acquisition. There was a study that I did, I think it was late last year, I did a survey just to see evaluators' understanding of the reading process as well as the assessment of reading. and where they felt like they needed additional assistance, etc. So some of the results are indicating that there is a need for more professional development out there among our evaluators when we're assessing the area of reading. So this is one of those, the rope model of reading is a great one, and you can Google rope model reading and there's several different types of visuals available. But again, it goes back to that previous simple view of reading, and that language comprehension and word recognition together are important for students to become good fluid readers, as well as have strong comprehension. And when we think about these terms just generally, language comprehension, word recognition, if we just think about them generally, we kind of miss the boat too. We need to remember that there's a lot of different strands that go into each of these skill areas. So for language comprehension, students have to have strong background knowledge, they have to have strong vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and then literacy knowledge. And then for word recognition, there has to be good phonological awareness, there has to be good decoding, and then sight recognition. So a breakdown in any one of these areas in language comprehension or word recognition can impact the student's reading abilities. So if we think about this in terms of how, important that language goes along to become a strong reader, and we look at each of these different strands, we'll have a better understanding too where that breakdown might be for the student and where we might need to intervene the most. So again, I've shown you this. This is just the language proficiency levels, and these charts are in the manual, and it's just showing you, based on the RPI, what is the language proficiency level for the student. And then for assessing specific learning disability, again, language is a key component of a specific learning disability. It talks about written or spoken, and it may manifest itself in an imperfect ability to listen, speak, think, read, write, spell, or do mathematical calculations. So each of these areas where I've bolded are assessed using the WMLS 3 as well. So there should be a table laid out like this for you as well, where you can look at those eligibility area. And again, when we're talking about CSEP and being very targeted in our assessments, we're able to, again, come in and look at these scores in relation to the other data that's been collected. And then, of course, if you're doing a bilingual evaluation, you want to make sure that you can assess them both in English and Spanish and be able to share their, compare their results. And then if you're looking at using it as part of a speech language evaluation, again, you do have your English Spanish test for listening comp and oral expression. And these next few slides just kind of show correlations between the WMLS and some of the speech language evaluations. So let's talk about using the WMLS for dyslexia. Again, dyslexia handbook's been updated, and we have outlines on what academic skills need to be looked at, what cognitive processes, and any additional areas we might need to assess. This is showing, this is something that actually Dr. Alvarado put together, and she's one of the authors of the WMLS. She put together years ago, just kind of showing how you can incorporate the WMLS into the dyslexia evaluation and how you could use it in place of the WJ in some areas. So you can kind of pick and choose. But for your oral language, you can use, you have the WMLS in English and Spanish. Phonological processing, you could use the WJ products or the Batteria, or you could pull in the TAPS for if you're looking at English and Spanish, you got the TAPS 3 for Spanish. Or if you're just looking at English only, you could use the CTOP. And then for academic testing, again, you could pull in some of these tests from the WMLS instead of using the WJ. So it's totally up to you, but it can fit nicely into your dyslexia evaluation. And then you can pull in like easy CBM or curriculum-based measures when we're looking at reading fluency measures as well. So also for dysgraphia, when you're using it for dysgraphia, you can, again, and I need to update this, we have updated the handbook, it's been revised, but chapter 5 is pretty much still intact. No major changes were made to the dyslexia piece. But we know that there's a lot of different definitions of dysgraphia out there. But the common difficulties that's been found in the research is around for dysgraphia is around the handwriting, spelling, and then getting thoughts on paper. So we've got overlap there. So with handwriting, you know, we're looking at legibility, we're looking at accuracy, and we're looking at automaticity. And some of this will come in based on, you know, doing analysis, error analysis of the students' handwriting samples, automaticity, looking at, you know, observing the student during the writing process, also having time versus untimed types of handwriting assignments, etc. And then spelling, we've got oral and written, and then getting thoughts on paper is really that taking that verbal expression and being able to apply it to the mechanics and the actual act of writing. So getting those thoughts on the paper. So when we're building an assessment battery for dysgraphia, we want to look at very similar to the process that you do with dyslexia. You've got primary characteristics, you got associated processes, and then you have unexpected in relation to other areas, unexpected performance in relation to other areas. So when we're looking at dysgraphia, the primary characteristics are difficulties with handwriting, difficulties with spelling, and then difficulties getting thoughts on paper. Now, we're talking about difficulties with handwriting. It's more than just having fine motor issues. You know, that is not a cause of dysgraphia. It's more of a language base and really having issues getting those thoughts on paper, not due to those fine motor skills. And it does, we do have to look at graphomotor processing and orthographic processing and phonological processing. So those are the associated processes. And then it has to be, performance has to be unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and effective classroom instruction. So when we're looking at using the WMLS for dysgraphia evaluation, the primary characteristics can be assessed through using the dictation and written language expression tests and pulling in those different types of data you can get from that, from watching them, observing them in the process of writing, conducting a error analysis, looking at the quality of writing, legibility, etc. So that's your assessing those primary characteristics. And then when you're looking at unexpectedness in relation to other cognitive abilities, we can compare that student's performance in those primary characteristic areas with oral comprehension and oral language expression. So that's going to be that area that you're going to compare to look at whether there is unexpectedness, that they're scoring lower than what we would expect them to score based on the results of the oral comprehension and the oral language expression. This was something that was actually put together by Dr. Sorry, she's not a doctor. She should be. She's so knowledgeable. Virginia Gonzalez. She used to be in the head of the dyslexia program throughout the state for a bit. But again, whether you're using the WMLS3 or one of the other measures, or collecting some informal, having an informal writing activity, we can get a lot of good information, a lot of qualitative data by watching and observing the student in the act of writing. So observe how much time and effort they take to complete a task, and then also observe body posture, handedness, pencil grip, controlled strokes, and erasures. And then review completed tasks for letter formation, size, proportion, spacing, slant, alignment, and line quality. So you can look at those different aspects when you're analyzing the results. So linking assessment results to intervention, again, there is the add-on online teacher-parent intervention system that gives a more robust report, and also recommended home-based activities for the parent report. There's also diagnostic statements, classroom interventions, etc., and the books based on book recommendations based on the student's performance as well. And these are just a few of the home-based activity examples for, you know, our young kids, and as they get older, how they're age appropriate. You've already seen the intervention. This is the teacher intervention report and the parent intervention report. And then again, the online remote testing option still available. When COVID hit, we did make all the WJ products available online. You've got digital manuals, you've got digital test easels with stimulus. Only those tests that require stimulus be projected to the student are included online, which means you still need your test easels to administer it. You need the test easels to follow, to have the directions that you have to say and all that to the student. And then you have the digital test records available. So I also created a tips for remote testing that's housed up under the WJ online scoring platform under resources. So that's something that's free. You can download. It's pretty comprehensive, thinking about setting up for remote testing, some of the things you really need to think about. Here's an example of the stimulus books that are included up under resources. So they're basically a PDF hyperlink. You can click on it and then it pops up. And then if you're using Zoom or one of those platforms, you would basically share screen, give dual control of the mouse over to the student so that when they're pointing to items, they can use the mouse to do the pointing, etc. So check those out. Hopefully we're not going to need those anytime soon, but they are available up under the resources tab. So in summary, just to wrap everything up, the WMLS3 yields important information about oral language abilities, reading and writing skills. There's 2 forms in English and 1 parallel Spanish form. It allows you to compare English, Spanish, oral language, reading and writing abilities. You can explore language proficiency and dominance. It does link you can link it to the WJ for more comprehensive evaluations. And then it does have the online parent teacher intervention program and the electronic record form. So we are at time. I don't see any questions in the chat. I want to thank you guys again for joining me today. Hopefully you've been thinking about how you might be able to integrate this into your practice. If you have any questions, you can email me. I see a question. I purchased the WMLS. How do I get online scoring? It should be set up once you log into Riverside Score. If you have the WJ, if you don't have the WJ, you should have received an email from Riverside with the link to Riverside Score and a temporary password for you to be able to go in and set up your scoring. If you haven't seen it, check your spam or your junk folder. Sometimes it gets caught up in there, or check with the person who purchased because it might have been sent to them. And then if you can't find it, reach out to customer service and ask them to resend it to you. A lot of times it's been getting caught up in the spam folder, so that might be why you haven't seen it. But you should receive, and then if you already have a WJ in your program, a Riverside Score program, it should have been added up under that. If it didn't, chances are maybe you have 2 departments in your school district that's using the WJ, and it may have been accidentally put up under the other program. So you want to check on that too. All right. Well, thank you. Reach out if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you on a future Beyond the Score. Have a great rest of your day. And again, reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.